So the first, so your question is very interesting. So the link between state security and social security in the German Democratic Republic, the GDR. So I think it's very interesting question because, of course, I mean the leadership in the GDR, the communist leadership, was aimed around security. And the thing which is interesting is that, in fact, this security was also very present and very important in the labor world. Everything, labor and big enterprises and everything which was related to labor was, in fact, a kind of tool to enforce this security. And social security has also to be thought within this framework. Social security was also a way, a mean, in fact, to enforce, to protect the security, the political security of the state. Why is it like that? For many reasons. There is at least one reason which is very often stated by people. Giving social security, giving benefits to people was a mean, in fact, to calm them down, though to buy in a certain way their loyalty to the state. And I think it's very partial view on what social security is about. In these countries, social security was more than just buying people through benefits. Social security was also a mean to socialize the people within big enterprises, because social security was everything. It was administered by the state, but it was distributed. The benefits were distributed on the level of enterprises. Social security is much wider in socialist countries than in capitalist countries. So it includes a lot of things. It includes, of course, healthcare, all the benefits which are related to healthcare when you are sick and so on. But it also includes daycares for small children, because women were working in this country, in particular in the GDR. Half of the manpower were women. And it was the highest rate of women employment in the world at the end of the 80s. And there were also a lot of things which were like food, which was available in big enterprises, even prepared food and so on. All that was part of social security in a certain way. So it's a kind of, taking care globally of the everyday life of the people. And in that extent, enterprises were the places where all that was distributed. It was very, and it means that the security of the people, the material security of the people was organized around labor, around the labor place, and was taken care in the labor place. So it means that it's not just that the state was in a way buying the security, buying the loyalty of the people, but it's also that it's another way of thinking about the importance and the role of labor in the society. Labor was really the big enterprises were the places where this security was possible for the people. If you were not working, if you were not employed in these big state enterprises, then you were in an insecure situation. So it's just that you have, in a certain way, to think about this society as a society organized around labor and around enterprises, because it's not just labor as they had to work, but it's really, the place where you worked. So, and in that extent, if you think about that, then the state security was really connected to the security of work. Central in this society, social work and social security, which was connected to work, was also a way to have security in this society. So it's these two different levels which have to be connected to each other in order to make sense out of it. Thank you for your question about this job security issue, which was very important in socialist countries in general, in the GDR in particular, since, as we've seen before, these big companies or big enterprises, state-owned, of course, I didn't mention it, but everything was nationalized in the GDR in particular after the 70s. In this being involved in these big state enterprises was absolutely crucial for the people. So it means that also everybody had this job security. In fact, it was, and if you look at the numbers, for example, it's very interesting because the employed people in the GDR, also it was a population in the 80s which was relatively old because the birth rate was very low. The employment quote was very high for an industrialized society. It was almost 57% of the population which was employed. At the same time, it was 45% in the Federal Republic. So, part of the population was employed. And why is it like that? It's like that because, in fact, first of all, there was no unemployment in this society. But on top of that, in fact, everybody had to work. There was a right to work, but there was a kind of obligation to work. People had to work. They had to work not just because of working, although it was also part of it. The construction of the socialist society, everybody had to get involved because it was not just a kind of economic duty, but it was also a political duty. It was to construct the socialist society. But by the way, it's very interesting because when you look at the constitution, the French Constitution of 1946, you have that exactly the same. You have to work, to construct, to be part of the Republic. It was also important. So it's not just connected to socialism. It's also really, a way of belonging to a political body in a certain way. But of course, it was not enforced in France because it was not possible to enforce it because it's private economy. But it was enforced in the GDR. It means that if the people didn't work, if they were labeled after the 60s as what they called asocials. And asocials was not just, you are an asocial. It was a juridical category. So it means that the people could go and they went into jail because they were labeled as asocial. An asocial was somebody who didn't work, or somebody who didn't want to work where the state wanted him to work. It means in big state-owned enterprises. So work was not just, the right to work was not just something which was positive, it was also something which was negative, because if you didn't want to do exactly what was meant for you, then you would be put in a category which was very dangerous for you, because in fact the people who were asocials, then they were sent to work camps. And then very often they came back and then they had to be re-educated in big state enterprises, in special work brigades which took care of them. And then very often, in fact, they didn't want to stay in these big enterprises. So they went back to trying to get a small job in stations. For example, stations are really places where asocials were very often there because they wanted to sell things, like cigarettes, this kind of thing. Something which was not really illegal, but was just at the border. So it's not that they didn't want really to work, but they didn't want to work for big enterprises. And that's and it's a kind of very, so the thing which is interesting is how work, in fact, tends to be a kind of pressure on people and how can I say that? And just a kind of limit to the freedom of the people. And the thing which is interesting is that in the language of the regime, you free yourself through work. But for a lot of people, in fact, work was exactly the reverse. Work was a prison in itself because they had to work in these big plants. And then, it led to prison. So that's, this combination which is very, very interesting.